I'm Michael, and for the past decade, my life has been intertwined with Lauren's in a way I could never have imagined. Our marriage has been a steadfast journey, built on a foundation of trust and mutual respect. We met 10 years ago, and from the moment I laid eyes on her, I knew there was something exceptional about her. Lauren's passion for life is what drew me to her. She has an infectious enthusiasm that can make even the most mundane days feel extraordinary. Lauren has always had a profound love for mountaineering. From the early days of our relationship, I knew this was a significant part of who she was. Her fascination with climbing has been a constant in her life, an unyielding passion that has led her to scale some of the most challenging peaks. Though I've never shared her fervor for the sport, I've always admired her dedication and strength. Supporting her dreams, even if they aren't my own, has been a core part of our relationship. In many ways, our differing interests have only strengthened our bond. While I prefer the comfort of solid ground and a good book, Lauren finds solace and exhilaration in the mountains. I've learned to appreciate her stories of triumphs and challenges from her climbs, even if I can't fully grasp the allure of standing on the edge of a cliff or conquering a new summit. Her adventures have become a part of my life, and I've come to cherish the way she lights up when she talks about her climbs. Our life together has been marked by a harmonious balance of shared experiences and individual passions. Lauren's climbing trips are often followed by long nights of me managing the household and our 2 children, while she's off chasing new heights. It's a rhythm we've adapted to, one that allows us to maintain our connection despite the physical distance that sometimes separates us. As I reflect on our decade together, I am reminded of the countless moments that have defined our marriage. Lauren's passion for mountaineering has been a significant part of our journey, shaping the way we navigate our life together. While our paths may diverge at times, the love and respect we have for each other remain the cornerstone of our relationship. And so, with every climb Lauren takes on, I remain her steadfast supporter, always ready to catch her when she comes back down. The days following Lauren's return from her latest climbing expedition were usually filled with stories of her adventures and the high-altitude exhilaration she thrived on. But this time, something felt different. Lauren received an unexpected invitation from her climbing club for an exclusive ascent in the Rockies. The opportunity was rare and coveted among her peers, and the news seemed to ignite a new level of excitement in her. As soon as she shared the invitation, I could see a noticeable shift in her demeanor. Lauren's excitement was palpable, but there was also an underlying tension that I hadn't seen before. She spoke of the climb with an intensity that was both captivating and unsettling. It wasn't just the usual thrill of a new challenge. It was as if this climb had become a pivotal moment in her life. In the days leading up to her departure, Lauren's behavior grew increasingly erratic. She was preoccupied, often lost in thought, and her usual calm was replaced with a nervous energy. I found myself at a loss, struggling to pinpoint the cause of her agitation. It wasn't typical for her to be so unsettled before a climb. Normally she was organized and composed, but now she seemed distracted and distant. Her preparations for the climb were meticulous, but there was an urgency to them that I hadn't witnessed before. Lauren spent hours reviewing gear lists and making detailed plans, but each time I tried to engage her in conversation, she brushed me off with a distracted smile. It was clear she was focused on something, but what exactly it was, I couldn't decipher. I began to wonder if my perception was clouded by the tension I felt between us. Was it simply the high stakes of this particular climb, or was there something more? Lauren had always been passionate about mountaineering, but this time, her enthusiasm seemed to have an edge that I couldn't quite grasp. It was as if the upcoming ascent had taken on a significance beyond just another climb. Despite my growing unease, I decided to give Lauren the space she needed. I wanted to support her, as I always had, but this time, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. As she prepared for her trip, I kept my concerns to myself, hoping that whatever was troubling her would reveal itself in time. Little did I know, the first hints of change were only the beginning of a much larger shift in our lives. As the days passed, Lauren's preparation for the upcoming climb became all-consuming. It was as if the ascent had taken over every aspect of her life. The house was filled with the rustle of new gear being unpacked and the faint scent of fresh rubber from the climbing shoes she had just purchased. I watched as she meticulously checked and rechecked her equipment, ensuring that everything was in perfect condition. It was clear that this climb meant more to her than any previous expedition. Lauren's dedication to her training was intense. She spent hours at the gym, pushing herself to new limits with every workout. Her regimen was rigorous, involving strength training, endurance exercises, and simulated climbing drills. I would often find her in the middle of a set of exercises, her face flushed and her breath coming in short, determined bursts. Her focus was unwavering, and the transformation in her was striking. Though I admired her commitment, it also worried me. The way she immersed herself in preparation seemed almost excessive, bordering on obsession. I had never seen her so consumed by a single goal. There was a palpable tension in the air, and her single-mindedness left little room for anything else, including our usual routines and family time. I couldn't help but wonder if her intensity was masking something deeper. Despite my concerns, I chose not to interfere. I knew better than to question her drive, especially when it came to something she was so passionate about. I supported her in every way I could, from helping with the logistics of her gear to managing the household and taking care of the kids. I wanted to be there for her, even if I didn't fully understand what was driving her to this level of preparation. Our conversations during this period were sparse, often reduced to brief exchanges about practical matters. Lauren's focus on the climb seemed to leave little room for much else. I tried to remain supportive, but the distance between us grew. Her preoccupation with the upcoming ascent was all-encompassing, and I felt like an outsider in her world of gear and training. As Lauren's departure date approached, I was left with a mix of admiration and unease. I respected her dedication and understood the importance of this climb to her, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Her drive was undeniable, but it seemed to come at the expense of our connection. I hoped that once the climb was over, things would return to normal, but deep down, I couldn't shake the sense that this was more than just a typical climb. It was a turning point, one that might change everything. As Lauren's departure day arrived, the house was abuzz with the last-minute preparations. She double-checked her gear, reviewed her packing list one final time, and gave a quick goodbye to the kids. I watched her with a mixture of pride and apprehension. Her excitement was evident, and while I was eager for her to embark on her climb, I couldn't shake the sense of unease that had been building in me. Once she left, the house fell into a quiet rhythm that felt both familiar and strange. With Lauren away, I was left to juggle parenting duties and manage the household on my own. The kids, while excited about their mom's adventure, missed her presence. I tried to fill the gaps with extra attention and activities, but it was hard not to feel her absence keenly. The days felt longer and quieter without her. Our phone calls were brief but frequent. Lauren would call in the evening, her voice filled with the excitement of the day's climb. However, our conversations became increasingly superficial. She would share highlights of her training sessions or the stunning views from her campsite, but the depth of our usual discussions was missing. I could tell she was preoccupied, her mind focused on the climb, rather than on our family or how I was managing. The lack of personal connection in our conversations began to weigh on me. I missed the more intimate and meaningful exchanges we used to have. The distance, both physical and emotional, was becoming more pronounced. Each call ended with a quick, "I love you," before Lauren would rush off to attend to her climbing preparations or get some rest. In her absence, I found myself reflecting on the changes that had occurred over the past few weeks. The enthusiasm that once characterized our relationship seemed overshadowed by a growing distance. I tried to stay positive and supportive, but it was difficult to ignore the growing gap between us. I longed for the days when our conversations were filled with genuine interest and warmth. As the week dragged on, I did my best to keep the household running smoothly while dealing with the nagging feeling that something was amiss. Lauren's focus on the climb was evident in every call, but I couldn't help but wonder if the strain of her preparation was affecting us more deeply than I had anticipated. I hoped that when she returned, we could reconnect and address whatever had shifted between us. But for now, I was left to navigate the quiet solitude of our home. As the week progressed, the frequency of Lauren's calls diminished, and the content of her messages began to raise concerns. At first, I attributed it to her demanding schedule and the physical toll of the climb. However, the nature of her communication soon started to feel strange. The messages I received were often curt, lacking the warmth and detail I had come to expect. One evening I received a message that seemed oddly disjointed, Lauren had written, "Just finished a long day with Jason. We're both exhausted but excited for tomorrow." The message was intended to be a simple update, but it contained an error that caught my attention. She had accidentally referred to Jason as my climbing partner, rather than just mentioning him in passing. The slip of the tongue was subtle but significant. My heart sank as I reread the message. I knew Jason was her climbing partner, but the way the message was phrased made it seem more personal than professional. My mind raced with questions and suspicions. Was there more to Lauren's relationship with Jason than she had let on? The brief, impersonal nature of her messages only heightened my anxiety. I tried to rationalize the situation, convincing myself that my concerns were unfounded and that the stress of the climb might be affecting her communication style. But the more I thought about it, the more uneasy I became. The message, though seemingly innocuous, felt like a crack in the facade of her usual composure. It was as if a hidden layer of her life was starting to reveal itself. To calm my growing apprehension, I decided to reach out to Lauren again. I sent a text asking if everything was okay and if there was anything she needed from home. Her response was swift but lacked any real reassurance. She mentioned that Jason had been a great help during the climb and that they had made significant progress. The response felt rehearsed and uncomfortably vague. As the days went by, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The combination of the error in her message and her detached communication made me question what was happening during her climb. I wanted to trust her and support her, but the growing sense of unease was hard to ignore. Little did I know this was just the beginning of a much deeper and more troubling revelation. Feeling increasingly uneasy, I decided to seek advice from a few close friends. I needed an outside perspective, someone who could offer clarity amidst my swirling thoughts. One evening, I met with Dave and Emma, a couple who had been our friends for years. Over coffee, I hesitated before sharing my concerns, but their support and understanding made it easier to open up. As I recounted the details of Lauren's recent messages and the strange error involving Jason, I noticed the growing concern on their faces. Dave leaned in, his expression serious. "It sounds like your gut is picking up on something," he said. "You know Lauren better than anyone. If something feels off, there might be a reason for it." Emma, always the more empathetic of the two, reached out and placed a reassuring hand on mine. "Sometimes our instincts are more accurate than we realize. If you're feeling this way, it's worth paying attention to. Trust yourself." Her words were meant to be comforting, but they only deepened my anxiety. The validation of my fears was unsettling, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the brink of uncovering something painful. I tried to rationalize their advice, but the more I thought about it, the more I became convinced that there was indeed something wrong. The mere possibility that Lauren's relationship with Jason might be more than just a professional partnership was a heavy burden to bear. I was torn between wanting to trust her and the gnawing suspicion that my instincts might be right. Dave and Emma's encouragement to follow my intuition added a layer of urgency to my feelings. They suggested I take some time to reflect and consider the next steps carefully. Their advice was practical, but it also left me with an unsettling sense of dread. The more I considered their insights, the more convinced I became that I needed to dig deeper, even if it meant confronting the possibility of a painful truth. As I left our meeting, I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. My friends had validated my concerns, and their advice had made it clear that ignoring my instincts was no longer an option. With a heavy heart, I prepared myself to face whatever revelations might come, hoping that the truth, no matter how difficult, would offer some semblance of clarity and resolution. When Lauren finally returned from her climbing expedition, the house felt like it was holding its breath. I was eager to see her, to reconnect after a week of distant conversations and growing unease. However, as she walked through the door, I immediately sensed a change. The warmth and excitement that used to accompany her returns were replaced by a subtle tension. Her initial greetings were hurried, almost perfunctory. She gave the kids quick hugs and moved about the house with an unusual urgency. I tried to engage her in conversation, hoping to bridge the gap that had formed between us. However, each attempt seemed to be met with a curt reply or a vague excuse. Lauren's responses were clipped, and she seemed to be hiding behind a veil of distraction. Lauren's behavior was markedly different from before. She was more secretive, often retreating to her study or the bedroom under the pretext of unpacking or organizing. Even when we were together as a family, there was an air of detachment about her. The lively and open person I had known seemed to have been replaced by someone who avoided eye contact and shied away from meaningful discussion. I tried to address my concerns, gently probing to understand what had changed during her climb. My questions were met with frustration or avoidance. Lauren would sigh and say she was just tired or needed some time to adjust back to home life. Her irritation was palpable, and it became increasingly difficult to have a candid conversation. It felt as if she was building an emotional wall between us. The shift in her demeanor was unsettling. The excitement she once radiated about her climbing achievements now felt overshadowed by an inexplicable aloofness. I noticed that she was still in frequent contact with Jason, often texting or making brief calls, which only added to my discomfort. The dynamic between us was shifting, and I struggled to understand the cause of this sudden change. As the days went by, the gap between us seemed to widen. Lauren's return, which I had hoped would bring clarity and closeness, only seemed to deepen the divide. I was left grappling with the unsettling feeling that something significant had shifted during her climb, and the person who came back was not quite the same. The challenge now was to navigate this new reality and uncover the truth behind the changes in our relationship. It was an ordinary afternoon when I stumbled upon the evidence that would shatter my sense of normalcy. Lauren had left her phone unattended on the kitchen counter while she was out running errands. I hesitated for a moment, but decided to use the opportunity to look at the photos she had taken during her climb, hoping to catch a glimpse of her experiences and the beauty she had described so often. As I scrolled through the photo gallery, most of the images were breathtaking landscapes and climbing shots. The snow-capped peaks and rugged terrain were impressive, but then I came across a series of photos that made my heart skip a beat. They were pictures of Lauren and Jason, taken in close quarters, their smiles and body language revealing a level of intimacy that was anything but casual. One photo stood out in particular. Lauren and Jason were embracing at the summit, their faces close together in what appeared to be a shared moment of triumph. Their body language was undeniably affectionate, with Jason's hand resting on Lauren's back in a way that seemed more personal than professional. The warmth in their expressions was a stark contrast to the cold, distant interactions I had observed from Lauren since her return. My hands trembled as I continued to browse through the images. Each photo seemed to confirm the growing suspicion that something had shifted between Lauren and Jason. The more I looked, the more convinced I became that their relationship had evolved into something beyond mere climbing partners. The physical closeness and the emotional connection evident in the photos were hard to ignore. The realization hit me with full force, leaving me feeling betrayed and devastated. I had hoped my fears were unfounded, that the distance between us was simply a result of stress and exhaustion from the climb. But these photos told a different story, one of a bond that was far too intimate for mere friendship or professional collaboration. As I put the phone back, my mind raced with a mix of anger, hurt, and confusion. I was faced with the painful truth that Lauren had crossed a line I never imagined would be breached. The evidence was clear, and it was impossible to deny what I had seen. I knew I had to confront her, but the thought of addressing the issue left me feeling overwhelmed. The next steps were daunting, but I couldn't continue living in denial. The photos had confirmed my worst fears, and I had to find a way to address the situation with Lauren. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Our relationship had been irrevocably altered, and the truth needed to be confronted head-on. With a heavy heart and a mind filled with tumultuous emotions, I decided it was time to confront Lauren directly. The photos had left no room for doubt, and I could no longer avoid the inevitable conversation. When she came home that evening, I waited until we were alone in the living room, where the tension between us was palpable. I took a deep breath, holding the phone with the incriminating images in my hand. "Lauren, we need to talk," I began, trying to keep my voice steady despite the storm of feelings inside me. "I found some photos on your phone from your trip. They show you and Jason being very close, closer than you've ever described." Lauren's face turned pale as she glanced at the phone I held out to her. Her eyes darted between the screen and my face, a flicker of guilt crossing her features. She started, but the words seemed to catch in her throat. She looked away, trying to compose herself, but the effort only intensified the tension in the room. At first, Lauren tried to deflect, insisting that the photos were taken in the heat of the moment and that they didn't mean anything. She claimed it was just a close friendship formed during a challenging climb. Her explanations sounded rehearsed and lacked conviction, further fueling my frustration and disbelief. Seeing that her evasions weren't convincing me, Lauren's resistance began to waver. The pressure of my unyielding gaze and the weight of the evidence seemed to force her hand. She slumped into the couch, her shoulders sagging in resignation. "Okay, fine," she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I had an affair with Jason. It wasn't planned, but it happened." Her confession hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt a mix of anger, betrayal, and sadness as the full impact of her admission sank in. The trust that had once been the foundation of our relationship had been shattered. Lauren's eyes were filled with tears, and she reached out, trying to bridge the distance that now lay between us. I struggled to find words, overwhelmed by the enormity of what had just been revealed. "Why, Lauren?" I managed to ask, my voice cracking with emotion. "Why did you do this? What does this mean for us?" Lauren's response was a torrent of remorse and regret. She spoke of her feelings of emotional disconnect and the unexpected bond she developed with Jason. Her explanations were clouded with sorrow, but they did little to heal the rift between us. The conversation was painful and raw, and I knew that this was just the beginning of a much longer and more difficult journey to understand and potentially rebuild what had been broken. The revelation of Lauren's affair hit me like a tidal wave, drowning me in an ocean of pain and betrayal. I felt as if the ground beneath my feet had crumbled away, leaving me in a free fall of emotions. My heart ached with a raw, searing intensity, and I could barely process the magnitude of what she had confessed. The woman I had loved and trusted for over a decade had shattered our bond, and I was left grappling with the broken pieces. As I sat there, struggling to contain the surge of emotions, I couldn't help but replay the past few months in my mind. Every moment of distant behavior, every hurried conversation, every subtle change now made a devastating kind of sense. The affair had tainted our memories and stained the foundation of our relationship. The images of Lauren and Jason together were burned into my mind, a constant reminder of her betrayal. Lauren sat across from me, tears streaming down her face. She tried to explain herself, her voice choked with guilt and sorrow. "Michael, I never meant for this to happen. It started as just a friendship, but the connection we felt during the climb was unexpected. I was feeling disconnected and lonely, and Jason was there for me in a way I hadn't felt in a long time." Her words were like salt in an open wound. The more she spoke, the more my anger and hurt deepened. How could she have allowed herself to cross that line? How could she have jeopardized everything we had built together for a fleeting connection? Her justifications felt hollow and inadequate, unable to bridge the chasm her actions had created between us. I tried to articulate my feelings, but the pain was too overwhelming. "Lauren, you betrayed me. You betrayed our family. How could you do this?" My voice trembled with a mix of rage and sorrow. "All those times I supported you, trusted you, and you were with him, building something behind my back. It's not just about the physical act. It's about the trust you shattered. How am I supposed to believe anything you say now?" Lauren's eyes were filled with regret, but her attempts to make me understand only fueled my frustration. "I know I hurt you, Michael, and I'm so sorry." I was lost and confused. Jason made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in years, but it didn't mean I stopped loving you. I never wanted to hurt you. Her explanations fell short, unable to touch the depths of my pain. The idea that she could still claim to love me while being involved with someone else felt like a cruel joke. My mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Anger, sadness, confusion, and an overwhelming sense of loss. The life we had built together, the trust we had shared, all seemed to have been a facade, easily shattered by her infidelity. As the night wore on, we sat in silence, the weight of the situation pressing down on us. I couldn't look at her without feeling the sting of betrayal, and yet, part of me still longed for the woman I had loved for so long, the woman who now seemed like a stranger. The emotional turmoil was relentless, leaving me exhausted and broken. The next steps were uncertain. The road to healing, if it even existed, seemed impossibly long and fraught with pain. Trust, once broken, is incredibly difficult to rebuild, and I wasn't sure if I had the strength to even try. Lauren's affair had changed everything, and I was left to navigate the wreckage of our relationship, unsure of what the future held. The emotional impact was profound, and as I faced the enormity of the betrayal, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. In the days that followed Lauren's confession, I found myself consumed by an incessant need to understand how we had arrived at this devastating juncture. My mind was a relentless whirlpool of questions, doubts, and self-recrimination. I replayed the past years of our marriage over and over, searching for clues, signs, anything that could explain why Lauren had strayed and why I hadn't seen it coming. I began to scrutinize every aspect of our relationship, examining the ebb and flow of our connection. We had always prided ourselves on our communication and on being a team that faced life's challenges together. But somewhere along the way, cracks had formed in our seemingly solid foundation. I couldn't help but wonder when the distance had started to grow between us. Had it been gradual, so subtle that I had missed it, or had it been there all along, masked by the routine and busyness of our lives? Reflecting on the early years of our marriage, I remembered the passion and excitement that had once defined our relationship. We were young and full of dreams, our future brimming with possibilities. But as time passed, the responsibilities of life, work, children, and daily obligations had taken precedence. Our conversations, once filled with dreams and aspirations, had become centered around logistics and practicalities. We had settled into a comfortable but perhaps complacent routine, one that might have left Lauren feeling unfulfilled. Lauren's dedication to mountaineering had been a significant part of her life, a passion that I had supported but never fully understood. While I admired her commitment, I had always maintained a respectful distance from her climbing world, content to cheer her on from the sidelines. Had this distance, this lack of shared interest in something so crucial to her identity, created a gap between us that Jason had filled? I couldn't help but think that my disinterest in her passion might have made her feel isolated and alone in pursuing her dreams. I also pondered the emotional dynamics of our marriage. Had I been emotionally available enough for her? Had I truly listened when she tried to share her struggles and fears? I recalled moments when she seemed distant or withdrawn, and times when she had hinted at feeling overwhelmed or disconnected. In retrospect, these might have been cries for help, signals that I had either ignored or failed to comprehend fully. My preoccupations with work and other commitments might have caused me to overlook her needs and concerns. As I delved deeper into my thoughts, I began to see that our relationship had suffered from a lack of intentionality. We had taken each other for granted, assuming that the bond we had built would sustain itself without consistent effort and nurturing. The routines and responsibilities that had become our norm had eroded the intimacy and connection that once defined us. I realized that maintaining a strong marriage required ongoing effort, something we had neglected in the busyness of our lives. The realization was a bitter pill to swallow. While Lauren's affair was a betrayal that had deeply wounded me, I couldn't ignore my role in the gradual disintegration of our relationship. The quest for understanding brought both clarity and pain. I saw the missed opportunities, the unspoken words, and the moments of inattention that had contributed to the distance between us. It was a humbling and sobering reflection, one that forced me to confront my shortcomings as a partner. The path to understanding was fraught with self-doubt and regret, but it was also a necessary journey. By seeking reasons, I hoped to find a way forward, whether that meant rebuilding our marriage or coming to terms with its end. The introspection was difficult, but it was the only way to make sense of the betrayal and to find some semblance of closure. As I grappled with these realizations, I knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but it was a journey I needed to undertake to heal and move forward. The decision to confront Jason was not an easy one. I knew that speaking with him would likely bring more pain, but I needed to hear his side of the story. It wasn't just about understanding what had happened. It was about facing the reality of the affair head-on, no matter how much it hurt. Armed with the determination to find closure, I arranged to meet Jason at a quiet coffee shop away from prying eyes. Jason arrived punctually, his demeanor reflecting a mixture of apprehension and resignation. As he approached our table, I couldn't help but notice the guilt etched on his face. He sat down, and for a moment we both just stared at our coffee cups, the silence between us heavy and charged with unspoken tension. I was the first to break the silence. "Jason, I need to know the truth. No more lies or evasions. I need to understand what happened between you and Lauren." My voice was steady, but inside my emotions were a turbulent storm. Jason took a deep breath, his hands clasped together on the table. Michael, I owe you an explanation. What happened between Lauren and me? It wasn't just a fling. It started during our climbing sessions. We spent so much time together, sharing experiences and challenges. We bonded over our passion for mountaineering, and that bond grew stronger with each climb. His words confirmed what I had feared, and my heart sank. The thought of them growing closer and sharing intimate moments was a bitter pill to swallow. Jason continued, his voice tinged with regret. We never planned for it to go this far. It just happened. We connected on a level that neither of us expected. At first, it was just friendship, but over time, it developed into something more. I leaned forward, the intensity of my emotions boiling over. But why? Why did you let it happen, knowing she was married, knowing the damage it would cause? The anger in my voice was barely contained. Jason's eyes met mine, filled with remorse. I know, Michael. I know it was wrong. I knew it was a betrayal, but it felt like something we couldn't control. We tried to resist it, but the feelings were too strong. We both felt a sense of fulfillment and understanding that we had been missing. His words were like knives, each one cutting deeper. I could feel the pain and betrayal intensifying, but I forced myself to listen. How serious was it? I asked, dreading the answer. Jason hesitated, then spoke softly. It was serious. We talked about a future together, about what it would mean if things changed. But Lauren was torn. She loves you, Michael. She never wanted to hurt you or the kids. That's why she struggled so much with her feelings. Hearing that they had contemplated a future together was a crushing blow. It wasn't just a moment of weakness. It was a relationship that had grown roots, deep enough to threaten the life we had built. I felt a surge of rage, but also a profound sadness. The woman I loved had been on the brink of leaving our family for another man. I struggled to maintain my composure, my voice thick with emotion. And now? What happens now that everything is out in the open? Jason sighed, the weight of the situation evident in his expression. Lauren and I ended things as soon as she returned from the trip. We knew it couldn't continue, not with the damage it would cause. She chose to stay with you and the kids. She wants to fix things, to try and rebuild what's been broken. The admission provided a small measure of relief, but the damage had been done. Our lives were irrevocably changed. I had come seeking answers, and I had found them, but the answers only brought more pain. Jason's sincerity was clear, and despite my anger, I could see that he was struggling with his guilt and regret. As our conversation came to an end, I stood up, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. Thank you for your honesty, Jason. It doesn't make things easier, but at least I know the truth. With that, I left the coffee shop, my mind swirling with the enormity of what I had learned. The road ahead was uncertain, but I knew that understanding the full scope of the affair was a necessary step in finding a way forward. The days following my conversation with Jason were a blur of raw emotions and sleepless nights. Lauren and I found ourselves in the unfamiliar and uncomfortable territory of discussing our future. The initial shock and anger had subsided, replaced by a heavy uncertainty about what lay ahead. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the same table where we had shared countless meals and moments, now a battleground for our fractured relationship. Michael, Lauren began, her voice trembling with a mix of hope and fear. I know I've hurt you deeply and I understand if you can't forgive me, but I want to try to fix this, to work on us. I still love you, and I believe we can rebuild our marriage stronger than before. Her eyes pleaded with me, seeking a sliver of the trust that had once defined our bond. I looked at her, the woman I had loved for so long, now a stranger in so many ways. The pain was still fresh, and the thought of moving forward seemed daunting. Lauren, I said slowly, trying to gather my thoughts, what you did broke something fundamental between us. I don't know if it can be repaired. Part of me wants to try, for the sake of our family, but another part of me isn't sure if I can ever trust you again. Trust is the foundation of any relationship, and right now it feels like ours has been reduced to rubble. Lauren nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. I understand, Michael. I don't expect things to go back to normal overnight. I'm willing to do whatever it takes, counseling, therapy, whatever you need. I'm committed to making this right, but I need to know if you're willing to give us a chance. Her sincerity was clear, but so was the enormity of the task ahead. As I sat there, torn between the love I still felt and the profound betrayal I had endured, I realized that this decision was not one to be made lightly. Rebuilding our relationship would require time, patience, and an unwavering commitment from both of us. "Let's take it one step at a time," I finally said. "We'll start with counseling and see where it leads us. I can't promise anything, but I'm willing to try." It was a fragile beginning, but it was a beginning nonetheless, a tentative step towards a future that was still uncertain. The process of rebuilding our relationship was arduous and fraught with emotional turmoil. Lauren and I began attending counseling sessions, where we confronted the painful truths and unresolved issues that had festered beneath the surface of our marriage. Each session peeled back layers of hurt and misunderstanding, forcing us to face the raw and unvarnished reality of our situation. The path to healing was not linear. There were days when the pain seemed insurmountable, and the prospect of forgiveness felt impossible. But amidst the struggle, there were also moments of clarity and connection, small victories that gave me hope that perhaps, one day, we could find our way back to each other. Outside of our sessions, I leaned heavily on my friends and family for support. Their unwavering presence provided a lifeline during this turbulent period. I found solace in their understanding and advice, their willingness to listen without judgment. Conversations with my closest friends often brought new perspectives and a sense of relief, reminding me that I was not alone in this journey. My family's love and support were invaluable, offering a foundation of stability and strength. These relationships, built on trust and mutual respect, became my refuge, helping me navigate the storm of emotions that threatened to overwhelm me. As I reflected on my decision to try and rebuild our marriage, I realized that it was not just about forgiving Lauren, but also about rediscovering myself in the process. I needed to understand my own needs and boundaries, to heal the parts of me that had been shattered by betrayal. This journey of self-discovery was intertwined with our efforts to mend our relationship, each step forward marked by introspection and growth. The future remained uncertain, but with the support of my loved ones and a renewed commitment to both myself and our marriage, I began to see a glimmer of hope on the horizon, a possibility of finding peace and acceptance in the aftermath of heartbreak.